Scene 1. The King's Summons. The halls of the royal castle echoed with the clank of armor and the murmurs of courtiers, but the grim expressions on the faces of Sir Aemon and his knights silenced any idle chatter as they strode through. Their last mission, the harrowing encounter with the vampire Valdric, still weighed heavily on their minds. Bruised but not broken, the knights had barely returned to the capital when they received the king's summons for a new mission. As the doors to the grand chamber swung open, the knights were greeted by King Alaric himself. His once strong face showed signs of weariness, though his eyes burned with the same fiery resolve. His brow furrowed as he regarded his finest warriors, each still bearing the scars from their last ordeal. Sir Aemon, Sir Gareth, Sir Lucan, Sir Aidan, the king began, his voice heavy with concern. I wish I could give you time to rest after your battle with the vampire, but a new threat has arisen, one that we cannot afford to ignore. Sir Aemon stepped forward, his body still aching from the vampire's brutal strikes, but his loyalty to the crown unwavering. Your Majesty, we are always ready to serve the realm. What plagues the kingdom now? The king's jaw tightened as he gestured toward a map spread across the long table before him. His finger rested on a small, remote town nestled between hills and dense forests. This town, Greywater, has sent word of a dire infestation, Wererats. At first, they were nothing more than a nuisance, stealing food and attacking livestock, but now, their numbers have grown. People are disappearing, and the town fears these Wererats are not merely scavengers but organized and dangerous. The knights exchanged uneasy glances. Wererats were notoriously cunning, far more dangerous than their appearance suggested. They were shapeshifters, capable of blending in with human society before striking. Worse still, their bite could spread their curse, turning the bitten into one of their own. Your Majesty, do we know how many we are dealing with? Sir Aidan asked, his voice steady despite the growing unease in the room. King Alaric shook his head. No. The reports are vague. Some townsfolk claim there are dozens, others believe there's a leader among them, one who controls the Wererats and rallies them into a more formidable force. The local militia has been unable to contain the problem. That is why I am sending you. Sir Gareth crossed his arms, frowning. If the town has already fallen under siege, there may be more than just Wererats at play. We should prepare for traps. The king nodded. Indeed. You must treat this mission as more than just a simple extermination. If these Wererats have a leader, their motives could be more sinister than mere survival. Sir Lucan, still recovering from his injuries but unwilling to sit out the mission, spoke up. And the town? Have they sent for aid from the surrounding villages? They have, the king replied, but the roads are treacherous, and few who venture to Greywater return. Time is of the essence. If the town falls entirely, it could lead to an outbreak of the curse throughout the kingdom. The gravity of the situation settled over the knights like a heavy cloak. Wererats weren't like Valdric's vampire, no single monstrous figure to defeat. This would be a war of attrition, of hunting and survival. Worse, any villager could already be infected, making it impossible to know friend from foe. We ride at dawn, Sir Aemon said, his tone resolute. We will rid Greywater of this scourge before it spreads further. King Alaric's shoulders seemed to relax slightly, his trust in the knights evident. I knew I could count on you. Go with all the resources you need. I wish you victory and a safe return. With their orders given, the knights bowed before the king and left the chamber, each of them deep in thought as they prepared for the journey ahead. The king's words had stirred memories of their encounter with Valdric, of how unprepared they had been for the power they faced. This time, they would be ready. Outside the castle, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the city. The knights headed to the armory to restock their supplies. Sir Gareth checked his sword with a grim face. Wererats, he muttered. These vermin don't fight fair. We'll need silver weapons, Sir Lucan reminded the group. Wererats can be felled by steel, but only silver can truly wound them. Sir Aemon nodded. And more than that, we need to be wary of their tricks. They can blend in as humans. We could be surrounded and not know it. We'll have to trust our instincts, Sir Aidan said quietly, his hand tightening around his sword hilt. The curse spreads fast. One bite, and anyone in that town could become a Wererat. We can't afford hesitation. The knights spent the remainder of the evening preparing for the journey, each of them silently steeling themselves for the horrors they knew awaited them. This mission would not be straightforward. There would be no clear enemy, no obvious villain to slay. But if they failed, the kingdom would face a new and insidious threat, one that could spread through its towns and villages like a plague. As they gathered by the stables, the night air cool and crisp, Sir Aemon glanced at his companions. Whatever happens in Greywater, we face it together. We've survived worse. Sir Gareth smirked, though it didn't reach his eyes. That vampire wasn't exactly easy to kill, but we managed. Sir Lucan, his voice soft but determined, added, "We'll manage this too." At dawn, the knights mounted their horses and rode out of the capital, their capes billowing behind them as they set off toward Greywater. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but their resolve was unwavering. They were the king's knights, his shield against the darkness. And they would not fail. Scene 2, the road to Greywater. The sun barely crested the horizon as the knights rode hard along the winding road to Greywater. Their horses' hooves beat a steady rhythm on the dirt path, a constant reminder of the urgency that drove them. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth, the result of the previous night's storm, and the distant hills were cloaked in morning mist, giving the landscape an eerie, otherworldly feel. Sir Aemon led the group, his eyes scanning the trees that lined the road. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, though no visible threat presented itself. His senses were heightened after their encounter with Valdric, and he trusted his instincts. They were riding into dangerous territory. "Keep your eyes sharp," Aemon called back to the others. "Wererats are tricksters. They could be lurking anywhere." Sir Gareth grunted in agreement, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "Or worse, hiding in plain sight. If any of them are in human form, we won't know until it's too late." The mention of Wererats in human form unsettled Sir Lucan, who rode toward the back of the group. His injuries from the vampire encounter still ached, though he tried to hide his discomfort from the others. "Do you think the whole town could be infected already?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. "We'll know soon enough," Sir Aidan said, his tone measured but grave. "Our job is to find out how far the infection has spread and put an end to it. If Greywater's lost, we'll need to act quickly to stop the curse from spreading to nearby towns." The knights continued in silence for a time, the weight of their mission hanging over them like a dark cloud. The road narrowed as they ventured deeper into the forest, and the once gentle breeze turned into a sharp, biting wind that sent shivers down their spines. The mist thickened, obscuring their vision and making it difficult to see more than a few paces ahead. Sir Aemon pulled his horse to a stop, raising a hand to signal the others. "Something's not right," he muttered, his eyes narrowing as he peered into the fog. The forest was unnervingly quiet, no birdsong, no rustling leaves, just an oppressive stillness that set his nerves on edge. The other knights reined in their horses and listened, their hands drifting instinctively toward their weapons. The silence stretched on, growing heavier with each passing moment. Sir Gareth's knuckles turned white as he gripped the hilt of his sword, his eyes darting from tree to tree. "I don't like this," Sir Lucan said, his voice low. "It feels like an ambush." Before anyone could respond, a figure emerged from the mist, stumbling toward them with a limp. It was a man, his clothes torn and dirty, his face pale and streaked with blood. He raised a trembling hand toward the knights, his eyes wide with fear. "Help, please, help me," he gasped, collapsing onto the ground before them. Sir Aemon was the first to dismount, rushing to the man's side. He knelt beside him, carefully turning him over to assess his injuries. The man's skin was clammy, and his breath came in ragged gasps. He looked as though he had been running for days. "What happened?" Sir Aemon asked urgently, trying to keep his voice calm. The man coughed weakly, his body trembling with exhaustion. "The town. Greywater, it's overrun," he rasped. "The Wererats, they've taken control." There's no one left. The knights exchanged grim looks. If the man was telling the truth, they had arrived too late to save Greywater. But they couldn't turn back now. They needed to assess the situation for themselves. "Are you from Greywater?" Sir Aidan asked, dismounting and kneeling beside Eamon. "How did you escape?" The man nodded weakly, his eyes flickering with fear. I was a guard. When they came, we fought, but there were too many. They bite, and then you turn. I ran. I'm the only one." Before he could finish, a low growl echoed from the forest, sending a chill down the knight's spines. Sir Gareth drew his sword in one swift motion, his eyes scanning the fog for the source of the sound. "We need to move," Sir Eamon said, rising to his feet and pulling the man up with him. "Whatever's out there is coming for us." As if on cue, dark shapes began to move in the mist, their glowing eyes reflecting the dim light filtering through the trees. The Wererats had found them. "Form up!" Sir Gareth barked, drawing his sword as the knights prepared for battle. They circled the man, their weapons at the ready. The first Wererat lunged from the fog, its claws slashing through the air. Sir Aidan deflected the attack with his shield and struck back, his sword slicing through the creature's furred arm. The Wererat hissed in pain but did not retreat. More of the creatures followed, emerging from the mist in a savage, coordinated attack. They moved with unnatural speed, their snarling faces twisted in a grotesque blend of man and beast. The knights fought bravely, their swords flashing in the dim light as they parried and struck back against the relentless onslaught. But for every Wererat they felled, another took its place, and the knights soon found themselves overwhelmed by sheer numbers. The man they had rescued cowered in the center of the group, too weak to defend himself. "They're too many," Sir Lucan shouted, slashing at a Wererat that had lunged at him. "We have to break through." Sir Eamon yelled in response, fending off another attacker. "Follow my lead." With a roar, Sir Eamon charged forward, his sword cutting a path through the swarm of Wererats. The other knights followed suit, pushing their way through the fog and into the unknown. Their only hope was to reach Greywater before the Wererats could regroup. The mist swallowed them once more, but the knights pressed on, determined to complete their mission. Scene 3, Greywater's Shadow. The mist thinned as the knights finally broke through the tree-line, the narrow path opening into a wide clearing. Before them lay Greywater, or what was left of it. The once bustling town now appeared as a hollow shell, the buildings in disrepair, windows shattered, and streets eerily deserted. The setting sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones, and an unnatural stillness blanketed the town, as if time itself had ceased. "We made it," Sir Eamon said, his voice barely more than a whisper as he scanned the town from atop his horse. "But it's worse than we feared." The man they had rescued, still slumped across Sir Aidan's saddle, groaned weakly. His breath came in shallow gasps, and his skin had taken on a sickly pallor. "No, you don't understand. It's not safe." Sir Aidan tightened his grip on the reins. "We've faced worse than this. Rest now. We'll find shelter." The knights slowly rode into the town square, weapons still drawn and senses on high alert. The air was thick with decay and the stench of rot, but there was no immediate sign of movement. Every window and doorway seemed to be watching them, waiting for something. "What happened here?" Sir Gareth muttered, glancing around. "There's no sign of a struggle. It's like the town just vanished." "Or was taken," Sir Lucan added, his hand never leaving the hilt of his sword. "We can't let our guard down. These Wererats could be hiding anywhere." They dismounted, moving cautiously through the streets, eyes scanning every shadow for signs of life, or worse. The weight of the situation pressed down on them. This wasn't just an infestation, it was something far more organized and calculated. The Wererats hadn't simply overrun the town, they had taken control of it. "We need to find the town hall," Sir Eamon said. "If there are any survivors, they'll likely be hiding there." As they made their way deeper into Greywater, the uneasy silence grew more oppressive. The streets were littered with debris, broken carts, discarded tools, and the occasional splash of dried blood. But there were no bodies, no signs of a struggle. It was as if the people had simply vanished into thin air. "There's something off about this," Sir Aidan muttered. "It feels like we're being watched." Sir Gareth grunted in agreement, his eyes narrowing. "The Wererats are smart. If they've organized, they'll be waiting for the right moment to strike. We can't let them corner us." As they approached the town hall, the large wooden structure loomed ominously over the square. Its windows were dark, and the heavy double doors were shut tight, but there was a faint flicker of light from within, a candle, perhaps, or a fire. "Someone's inside," Sir Lucan said, motioning toward the light. "Could be survivors." "Or a trap," Sir Aemon countered, his voice low. "We go in cautiously." The knights approached the doors in formation, their shields raised and weapons ready. Sir Aemon gave a nod, and Sir Gareth moved to push the door open. The heavy wood groaned as it swung inward, revealing the dimly lit interior of the town hall. The smell hit them first, a thick, cloying scent of death and decay. The inside of the hall was in disarray, with overturned furniture, broken windows, and a large table at the center covered in maps and papers. But what caught their attention was the figure standing in the shadows at the far end of the room. Tall, thin, and dressed in tattered black robes, the figure stepped forward, his face partially obscured by a hood. His movements were unnaturally fluid, and his voice, when he spoke, was smooth as silk and dripping with malice. "Welcome, Knights of the Realm," the figure said, his lips curling into a sinister smile. "I was wondering when you'd arrive." Sir Aemon immediately raised his sword. "Who are you? And what have you done to this town?" The figure chuckled, his laughter echoing off the walls in a way that made the knight's skin crawl. "So many questions, and so little time. I am Velar, and I am the one who has brought order to Greywater." "Order?" Sir Lucan spat. "You call this order? You've turned these people into monsters." Velar's smile widened. "Monsters, you say?" "No, I've given them purpose. The people of Greywater were weak, divided. Now, they are part of something greater, something unstoppable." Sir Aidan stepped forward, his sword gleaming in the dim light. "You're the one leading the Wererats. You're responsible for this madness." "Indeed," Velar said, his eyes gleaming with a dark, unnatural light. "I have given them the gift of transformation, of power. And soon, all will join us." Sir Gareth tightened his grip on his sword. "We're not here to join you. We're here to end you." Velar's smile faded, and his eyes narrowed. "I was hoping you would say that. It's been far too long since I had a worthy challenge." With a snap of his fingers, the shadows around the hall seemed to come alive. From the corners of the room and the darkened doorways, Wererats began to emerge, dozens of them, their eyes glowing and their teeth bared in snarling grins. "Kill them," Velar commanded, his voice cold and merciless. The knights raised their shields as the Wererats lunged toward them, teeth and claws flashing in the dim light. The room erupted into chaos as the battle began, swords clashing against claws, shields deflecting savage blows. The Wererats were fast, far faster than any normal foe, but the knights held their ground, fighting back with practiced precision. Sir Aemon parried a swipe from one of the creatures and struck back, cutting deep into its shoulder. The Wererat howled in pain, but another quickly took its place. Sir Aidan fought at his side, his blade moving in a blur as he fended off two more attackers. "We're outnumbered," Sir Gareth shouted, slashing at a Wererat that had leapt onto his back. "We need to find a way out of here." Sir Aemon glanced toward the door, but the Wererats had already blocked their escape. They were surrounded. Scene 4, The Tide Turns. The clamor of battle echoed through the dimly lit town hall as the knights fought tooth and nail against the swarm of Wererats. The vicious creatures attacked relentlessly, claws and fangs flashing in the low light, but the knights held their ground, their swords slashing through the horde with deadly precision. "We can't keep this up forever," Sir Lucan shouted, parrying a strike from one of the Wererats that lunged at him. We don't have to, Sir Aemon replied through gritted teeth as he deflected another attack. We just need to outlast them. Find Veeler, he's the one controlling them. Veeler stood at the far end of the room, watching the battle unfold with a look of amusement on his face. He made no move to join the fight himself, content to let his minions do the dirty work. His eyes gleamed with malice, and a twisted smile played on his lips as he observed the struggle. We need to break through to him, Sir Aidan said, his sword flashing as he cut down another Wererat. If we take out Veeler, maybe the rest will scatter. Aemon nodded, his eyes narrowing as he locked onto their true target. Gareth, Lucan, stay close. We're going after him. With a roar, the knights surged forward, hacking their way through the mass of snarling Wererats that blocked their path. The creatures fought savagely, but the knights' training and experience began to turn the tide in their favor. One by one, the Wererats fell, their bodies littering the floor of the hall. Veeler's smirk faded as he realized the knights were closing in on him. With a sharp wave of his hand, more Wererats emerged from the shadows, but there was a new edge to his voice, a slight tremor of uncertainty. Stop them, he commanded, but his minions were weakening, their numbers dwindling. Sir Gareth slashed through another Wererat, its body crumpling to the ground, and pointed his sword toward Veeler. Your time's up, monster. Veeler sneered. You think you can defeat me, knight? You've barely survived my pets. I am far more than just their master. Suddenly, Veeler's body began to shift. His bones cracked and reshaped, his face elongating into a grotesque snout as dark fur sprouted across his skin. In moments, he had transformed into a towering figure, half man, half rat, his eyes glowing with an unnatural red light. A true Wererat, Sir Lucan whispered, horror creeping into his voice. He's not just their leader. He's one of them. Veeler lunged at them with shocking speed, his claws swiping through the air with deadly precision. Sir Aemon barely had time to raise his shield before the blow landed, sending him stumbling backward from the sheer force of the attack. The knights regrouped quickly, forming a defensive circle as Veeler stalked toward them, his hulking frame looming over them. We need to bring him down, Sir Aemon said, his voice steady despite the dire situation. Stay on the defensive and look for an opening. Veeler roared, his voice an unholy mix of human and beast, and charged again. His claws struck Sir Aidan's shield with such force that it cracked, splintering under the weight of the blow. Aidan grunted in pain, barely able to keep his balance as he deflected another swipe. He's too strong. Sir Gareth shouted, his sword glancing off Veeler's thick hide with little effect. We can't take him head-on. But Sir Aemon's eyes narrowed in determination. We don't have to. We just need to outsmart him. Veeler lunged again, his movements erratic and wild, but in his monstrous rage, he left himself exposed. Sir Lucan, seeing the opening, darted to the side and slashed at the back of Veeler's legs, his sword slicing through muscle and tendon. The Wererat howled in pain and staggered, his balance momentarily thrown off. Now! Sir Aemon shouted. The knights attacked in unison, their swords flashing as they struck at Veeler from all sides. The Wererat leader roared in fury, his claws lashing out wildly, but the knights were too quick, their coordinated strikes forcing him back. Veeler stumbled, blood pouring from his wounds, but even weakened, he was still dangerous. His red eyes blazed with hatred as he glared at Sir Aemon. You think you've won? You fools! This is far from over. With a final, desperate roar, Veeler unleashed a wave of dark magic, the force of it knocking the knights backward and scattering them across the room. For a moment, the world seemed to spin, and when the knights regained their senses, Veeler was gone. He's escaped, Sir Aidan muttered, pushing himself to his feet and wiping blood from his brow. Damn it, we were so close. Sir Aemon sheathed his sword, his jaw clenched in frustration. We've weakened him. But he's not finished yet. He'll regroup, and when he does, he'll be even more dangerous. We need to finish this, Sir Lucan said, his voice grim. If Veeler regains his strength, Greywater won't be the only town to fall. The knights stood in the wreckage of the town hall, their bodies bruised and bloodied, but their resolve unbroken. Wheeler had slipped through their fingers, but they had dealt him a heavy blow. Now, it was only a matter of time before they would face him again, and next time, they would be ready. The Wererats had not only taken Greywater, they had become a plague on the land. The knights knew that their mission had just begun, and the fate of the kingdom rested on their shoulders. "Gather your strength," Sir Aemon said, his voice steely with determination. "We ride at dawn. This isn't over." Scene 5, the hunt begins. Dawn broke over Greywater, the sun casting a pale, weak light through the lingering mist that clung to the ground like a shroud. The knights stood at the edge of the ruined town, their horses restless beneath them. The previous night's battle had left its mark: torn streets, broken buildings, and the scattered remains of slain Wererats. "We should have finished him," Sir Lucan said, tightening the straps on his saddle. His eyes burned with anger. "We let Wheeler escape, and now who knows where he's hiding?" Sir Aemon remained silent, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Wheeler's retreat was a bitter pill to swallow, but he knew better than to rush into the next confrontation. The Wererat leader had slipped away into the night, and tracking him down would not be easy. But one thing was certain: they couldn't allow him to regroup. "We weakened him," Sir Aiden said, his voice quieter than usual. He held his wounded side, the result of a deep gash from one of Wheeler's Wererats. That was a victory in itself. "Now we just need to finish the job." Sir Gareth shook his head. "A victory? We barely made it out of that fight alive. If Wheeler is as powerful as he seems, we may need more than just our swords to defeat him." Aemon finally turned to face his comrades. His face was drawn, his eye steely with determination. "We don't have a choice. Wheeler's power is growing, and if we let him recover, he'll strike again. The kingdom's survival depends on us stopping him before it's too late." The knights nodded, though the weight of their task hung heavily in the air. They had seen firsthand what Wheeler was capable of. His Wererats were not just mindless beasts, they were organized, strategic, and growing in number. Worse, Wheeler himself was no ordinary foe. His mastery of dark magic and his ability to command the Wererats made him a dangerous adversary, one who would not be easily defeated. "We'll need to track him," Sir Gareth said. "Wheeler won't have gone far, not in his condition. But if he's hiding, he'll make sure to cover his tracks." Sir Lucan glanced toward the woods that bordered the town. "He's smart. He'll want to lure us into a trap. The deeper we go, the more dangerous it will become." Sir Aemon mounted his horse, his eyes scanning the distant tree line. "We know the risks. But we can't stay here and wait for him to strike again. We ride now." The knights spurred their horses forward, leaving the broken town of Greywater behind them. The forest loomed ahead, its tall, ancient trees casting deep shadows across the path. The further they rode, the darker the forest seemed to grow, the mist rising once more and weaving between the trunks like the tendrils of some unseen force. The eerie quiet that had settled over Greywater followed them into the woods. Birds did not sing, and the usual sounds of wildlife were conspicuously absent. Even the wind seemed muted, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. "The air feels wrong," Sir Aiden said, glancing around uneasily. "Like the forest is watching us." "It's the magic," Sir Gareth replied, his voice low. "Wheeler's influence reaches far beyond Greywater. This place is tainted by his power." Sir Lucan rode ahead, his sharp eyes scanning the ground for any sign of Wheeler's passage. But the Wererat leader had covered his tracks well. There were no broken branches, no disturbed earth, nothing to suggest where he had gone. It was as if he had simply vanished into the shadows. "We need to find something, some clue," Sir Lucan muttered. "He can't have disappeared completely." The forest grew thicker as they rode deeper, the trees closing in around them, the gnarled branches forming a twisted canopy overhead. The path they followed became narrower, winding through dense underbrush that clawed at their armor. Then, abruptly, the path ended. They found themselves in a small clearing, the ground covered in strange, circular patterns, runes etched into the earth. The air was heavy with the scent of dark magic. "This is where he stopped," Sir Gareth said, dismounting and crouching to examine the runes. "These markings, they're powerful. He must have used them to heal himself." Sir Aemon knelt beside him, tracing the lines of one of the runes with his gauntlet hand. "A ritual. He's drawing on the magic of the land to strengthen himself." "Then we're too late," Sir Lucan said, his voice grim. "If Velar has regained his strength, he'll be preparing to strike again." Sir Aidan frowned, glancing around the clearing. "These runes, they're not just for healing. They're for summoning. Velar's not alone." As if in response to his words, the shadows at the edge of the clearing began to shift. Slowly, dark shapes emerged from the trees, more Wererats, their eyes glowing red in the dim light. They moved silently, surrounding the knights with deadly intent. "We've walked right into his trap," Sir Gareth muttered, drawing his sword. From the opposite side of the clearing, Velar appeared. He stood tall, his form now fully healed, his dark fur glistening in the dim light. His red eyes glowed with malice, and a twisted smile curled his lips. "You've been persistent," Velar said, his voice smooth and mocking. "But it ends here. You will not leave this forest alive." The knights raised their weapons, their hearts pounding as they prepared for the fight of their lives. Velar's Wererats closed in, snarling and growling, their claws gleaming in the dim light. Sir Aemon stepped forward, his sword raised, his voice steady. "We're not afraid of you, Velar. We'll end this, here and now." Velar chuckled, the sound cold and cruel. "You may try, knight. But you will find that I am not so easily defeated." With a snap of Velar's fingers, the Wererats lunged forward, and the battle began once more. Scene 6, The Ambush. The Wererats charged with a bloodthirsty roar, claws slashing through the air as they rushed at the knights. Their glowing red eyes were filled with fury, and their speed was unnaturally swift, a testament to the dark power Velar wielded over them. Sir Aemon's heart pounded in his chest, but his resolve remained firm. He raised his shield, blocking the first strike from a Wererat, then countered with a swift sword slash that cut deep into the creature's side. It howled in pain, stumbling back, but more were already closing in, circling like wolves hunting prey. "We can't take them all at once," Sir Aidan shouted, his sword flashing as he cut down another Wererat. "Stay together." The knights formed a defensive ring, their backs to one another as they faced the oncoming horde. Steel clashed against claw and fang, the sounds of battle filling the clearing as they fought for their lives. Sir Gareth swung his blade in wide arcs, trying to keep the creatures at bay. "There's too many of them," he growled, slashing at another Wererat that lunged at him. "We need to thin their numbers." "We don't have time to worry about numbers," Sir Lucan said, driving his sword into the chest of a Wererat and kicking it off his blade. "Velar is the one controlling them. We have to get to him." But Velar remained at the edge of the clearing, watching the battle with a smug grin on his face. His hulking form loomed in the shadows, his red eyes glowing with malice as his Wererats fought in his stead. "You fight well, knights," Velar called, his voice dripping with mockery. "But you are outmatched. My minions are stronger than any mortal blade. You cannot hope to defeat me." Sir Aemon's eyes flicked to Velar, anger burning in his chest. The Wererat leader hadn't joined the fight himself, and that only confirmed what they suspected: Velar was the key. The Wererats wouldn't stop until he was brought down. "Keep them occupied," Sir Aemon ordered, parrying another attack. "I'm going after him." "You'll never make it through," Sir Aidan shouted, blocking a vicious swipe from a Wererat. "They'll tear you apart." "We don't have a choice," Aemon said through gritted teeth. "We have to stop Velar before he overwhelms us." With a burst of energy, Sir Aemon surged forward, cutting his way through the Wererats with sheer force. His sword gleamed in the dim light as he hacked and slashed his way toward Velar, his focus singular. Velar's smile faltered as he saw Aemon advancing. He stepped back, his hands weaving through the air as dark magic gathered around him. "You're bold, knight. But bravery won't save you from what's coming." The Wererats, sensing their leader's distress, swarmed toward Aemon, determined to stop his approach. But the other knights held their ground, cutting down any creature that tried to get past them. Sir Lucan grunted as he parried a blow, his muscles straining under the weight of the fight. Aemon's not going to make it alone. We have to help him. But Sir Gareth shook his head. If we leave this position, we'll be overrun. We need to hold the line. The battle raged on, each knight fighting with everything they had, but even their strength was starting to wane. The Wererats were relentless, and for every one they cut down, another took its place. Sir Aemon reached the edge of the clearing, his eyes locked on Velar. The Wererat leader bared his teeth in a wicked grin, his form shifting as dark magic surged through him. In an instant, Velar transformed into his monstrous Wererat form, standing taller and more powerful than ever before. So, you think you can defeat me, knight? Velar sneered, his voice a low, guttural growl. You are nothing compared to the power I command. Sir Aemon gripped his sword tightly, his heart racing. He knew this would be the fight that decided everything. We'll see, he growled, stepping forward. Velar lunged, his massive claws slashing toward Aemon with deadly precision. The knight barely managed to raise his shield in time, the force of the blow sending him staggering backward. Velar was fast, faster than Aemon had anticipated, and the weight of his strikes made it clear that this was no ordinary fight. Aemon gritted his teeth and swung his sword, aiming for Velar's exposed side. The blade found its mark, cutting deep into the Wererat's flesh, but Velar barely flinched. With a roar of fury, Velar lashed out again, his claws tearing through Aemon's armor and sending him crashing to the ground. The pain was immediate and blinding, but Aemon pushed himself to his feet, refusing to stay down. He couldn't afford to. Not now. Velar's eyes gleamed with malice as he advanced. You're a fool to think you could stand against me. Sir Aemon's breath was ragged, but he didn't back down. He raised his sword once more, his mind racing. He needed to end this, quickly. Just as Velar moved to strike again, a flash of steel caught his attention. Sir Aidan, bloodied and battered, had broken through the Wererats and joined Aemon at his side. You didn't think I'd let you fight him alone, did you? Aidan said with a smirk. Aemon grinned through the pain. Glad you made it. Together, they faced Velar, their blades ready. The Wererat leader snarled, his red eyes blazing with fury. You're both fools. You will die here, and your kingdom will fall with you. With a roar, Velar charged, his claws slicing through the air. The knights moved as one, their swords flashing as they deflected his strikes. But Velar was relentless, his power overwhelming, and even with their combined strength, they struggled to hold him back. Velar slammed into Aemon, sending him crashing into a tree, the force knocking the wind out of him. Aidan barely managed to avoid the same fate, rolling to the side as Velar's claws slashed through the air where he had been standing. We're losing ground. Aidan shouted, his voice filled with frustration. We can't keep this up. Sir Aemon struggled to his feet, blood dripping from his wounds. He knew Aidan was right. They were being overpowered. But they couldn't give up, not now. We hold him here, Aemon said, his voice resolute. We end this. No matter the cost. Velar growled, his claws gleaming in the dim light. Your end is inevitable, knights. Your kingdom will fall to the Wererats, and I will be its king. But Sir Aemon raised his sword, his eyes blazing with defiance. Not if we stop you first. And with that, the final battle began in earnest. Scene 7, the final battle. Velar's roar echoed through the forest, shaking the very air as he lunged at Sir Aemon and Sir Aidan. His claws, darkened by magic, slashed through the space between them, forcing the knights to move with desperate agility. Despite their battered armor and bloodied bodies, they held their ground, refusing to yield to the monstrous Wererat leader. Aemon could feel the weight of the fight bearing down on him. His muscles ached with every swing of his sword, and the gashes across his chest burned like fire. Yet he could not, and would not, falter. Velar had to be stopped, or everything they fought for, the kingdom, the people, their very lives, would be lost to the Wererats. Hold steady. Sir Aemon yelled to Aiden as Velar came at them again, fangs bared and claws poised to strike. Aiden, equally bloodied but just as determined, dodged a wild swipe from Velar and brought his sword down hard against the Wererat's leg. His blade found purchase, cutting through the thick fur and muscle. Velar howled in pain, staggering back for a moment. That'll slow him down. Aiden gasped, but he knew it wouldn't last. Velar's wounds, though severe, seemed to heal faster than any normal creature's. Velar's glowing red eyes fixed on Aiden, fury burning hotter now. You think that will stop me, human? Velar's voice was guttural, filled with both rage and cruel amusement. You are nothing. You cannot defeat me. Velar's form shifted again, growing even larger, his muscles bulging grotesquely. His claws lengthened, and his fur bristled with dark energy. The transformation sent a shudder through the knights. This isn't just dark magic, Sir Gareth called out from the edge of the clearing, where he and Lucan were still fending off the remaining Wererats. He's drawing power from something more, something evil. Sir Lucan, sweat streaming down his face, grunted as he hacked down another Wererat. We can't keep this up. We have to finish this fight now. Aemon knew Gareth was right. Velar wasn't just a physical threat, his power came from something ancient and malevolent. The runes they had found earlier had hinted at a ritual far more sinister than mere healing. Velar was tapping into dark forces that made him nearly invincible. As the realization dawned, Velar struck with renewed fury. His massive claws tore through Aiden's defenses, knocking the knight to the ground. Aiden let out a cry of pain, his sword skittering away as he clutched his side. Aiden! Aemon shouted, rushing toward his fallen comrade, but Velar was faster. Before Aemon could reach him, Velar grabbed Aiden by the throat, lifting him effortlessly into the air. Aiden struggled, gasping for breath as Velar's claws dug into his neck. I should kill you now, Velar hissed, his voice low and menacing. But where would the fun be in that? You will all die soon enough. Slowly. Sir Aemon knew he had no time. In a desperate move, he flung his sword at Velar's head, the blade spinning through the air. Velar saw it coming and released Aiden just in time, ducking to avoid the blow. The sword missed its mark, embedding itself into a tree behind the Wererat. Velar turned, a cruel smile curling on his lips. Is that the best you can do, knight? You are weak. Your kingdom is weak. Aemon gritted his teeth, knowing he was now weaponless. His mind raced, searching for any solution, any way to end this nightmare. His eyes flicked to the strange runes still glowing faintly on the ground, the ritual site where Velar had drawn his power. The runes. That was the key. Gareth. Lucan. Aemon shouted, his voice filled with urgency. The runes, destroy them. They're feeding his power. The other knights, still locked in battle with the Wererats, glanced toward the ground where the strange symbols pulsed faintly. Sir Gareth's eyes widened in understanding. Lucan, go. Sir Lucan nodded and broke away from the Wererats, sprinting toward the runes. With a mighty swing of his sword, he smashed the ground, disrupting the intricate patterns in the earth. As his sword cut through the symbols, a wave of dark energy erupted from the runes, crackling through the air. Velar let out an agonized scream, staggering as the power sustaining him was severed. His form flickered, momentarily shrinking back to a more humanoid shape. Blood poured from the wounds he had so easily healed before. You fools! Velar snarled, his voice thick with fury and pain. Do you think this will stop me? I will still destroy you all. But the tide had turned. Sir Aemon rushed forward, seizing the opportunity. He retrieved his fallen sword and, with a roar of determination, plunged the blade into Velar's chest. The Wererat leader howled, his eyes glowing with one last flare of hatred before the dark energy that sustained him finally unraveled. Velar's body convulsed, his monstrous form collapsing under its own weight. For a moment, the clearing was filled with nothing but the sound of heavy breathing and the groaning of the earth, as if the forest itself sighed in relief at the end of Velar's dark influence. Aemon stood over the fallen body, his chest heaving as he stared at the Wererat leader's lifeless form. The remaining Wererats, now leaderless and confused, scattered into the forest, disappearing into the shadows from whence they came. Sir Gareth and Sir Lucan joined Aemon, bloodied but victorious. Aidan, though wounded, managed to stagger to his feet, a weak smile on his face. "It's over," Aidan said, his voice hoarse. Aemon nodded, but his face remained grim. "For now." But Velar was just the beginning. "We need to report back to the king." As the knights regrouped and prepared to leave the cursed forest, the weight of their victory was tempered by the knowledge that darker forces were at play. Velar's defeat was only the first step in a battle against something far more ancient and dangerous. The fight was far from over.